Okay. All right, let's get started on this special meeting, and thank you everyone for joining us, and Happy New Year to all of you. And I would say a cautious Happy New Year to everyone. I'm going to turn this over to Rebecca. We've got a whole lot to cover and probably lots of questions from everyone. And I'll just call your attention that Jennifer sent out the 30 comments that we got in earlier. She and I just had, and Herman had a conversation about how to handle these comments. I'd like to, in the opening, note that we had 30 comments, the gist of which were very similar, and not read the comments per se, but say they'll be included in the minutes. And I think that should be adequate. If we took the time to read the 30 comments, I think that would take up a lot of the meeting time. And Jennifer says no one has asked to be looped into our meeting. So we'll make sure that these are in the minutes, and anyone who has comments on the comments could make those at that time. But if you're okay with that, I might just say we had 30 comments, the gist of which were all similar, and it was an encouragement for the commission to spend COVID monies on programs that were either COVID related, such as main streets, walking, biking, transit, or safety projects. Do you think that's adequate? Is everyone okay with that approach? If you're not, just say so. Okay, good. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you now, Rebecca. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Actually, I'll turn it back to Director Liu and see. I think she wanted to kick us off.
Oh, good.
Sure. So thank you. First of all, Happy New Year to everybody, and thank you for getting on the line so quickly in the new year. What I think is a really important and timely conversation. We got a sort of surprise holiday surprise of having a portion of transportation funds that got allocated to us in the federal stimulus bill. It came with a task to do some work over the holiday week, and really people came together very, very fast to sort of work through this exercise in rapid speed. Rebecca and Jeff have an excellent presentation that they'll walk you through, but a couple of things that I just want to kind of highlight at the forefront. The first is that the amount of money that we received, it's about $134 million, plus a couple of much smaller buckets that come for specialized uses. It's a lot of money, but it is not enough money to do everything, as everyone here knows. So what we endeavored to do was to come up with a regionally equitable distribution to sort of take a meaningful bite out of our 10-year plan, not try and do everything because we just can't, but to try and make sure that, particularly given the job creation impacts of these projects, that it's spread out in a way that sort of reflects the regional equity formula we've used throughout the plan. A portion of the dollars are sub-allocated to the three MPOs on the Front Range, which is by dint of the statute. The formula that was used to allocate these dollars, as you'll hear more about, is one that requires that a certain portion go into major and sort of second tier sized metropolitan areas. That's the formula that the feds picked. So we sort of built that into an equity formula, but there are some constraints on this money so that we didn't have total carte blanche on what went where. And you'll see that we took that set of parameters. It's probably not the formula we would have picked if we could choose from among them, but we didn't get to pick. So we took that and we tried to work it into an equitable distribution. What it also does, and this is really important to talk about at the outset, is that these dollars are a subset that are sort of the first out the door, right? They're ready to go. We deliberately picked projects that are done to the degree that they can get out to bid within a matter of the next few weeks, so that we can really make sure that the shovels are in the ground this spring and that the preparatory work can happen immediately. That means that they're not. There are some projects we all care about a great deal that are not ready for this particular distribution. But, by virtue of, primarily these projects were taken from what would have otherwise been the 267 year 3 list. So effectively, that means that when 267 year 3 comes in, it will mean that there's more money to allocate in a couple of months. So, right, there's a bit of a tiered ripple effect in that these ones are sort of the first out the door, but it frees up more money later to go to the projects that probably would have encumbered funds from 267 year 3 otherwise. So I think that's an important piece of context for thinking not just about these projects, but what they mean, a few months down the line when we hopefully have another tranche to be able to allocate very soon. So it looked like Sydney had a question.
Yes, thank you. And maybe this would be part of the discussion anyway, but I want to make sure that we understand how were these decisions made? What, who came together to make up the list that we've got in our memo here?
Sure. So all of these projects are on the 4-year portion of the 10-year list that you already approved. So, nothing came out of thin air here. These are all projects that are in the plan that we've vetted already. And, you'll recall that months ago, the sort of approach to building back from the kind of cuts that we had to make a few months, almost a year now, were that we would sort of start from a bare bones scenario and then build back to our plan. So all of the projects here are building back to our plan from what is on the list that was previously vetted and approved by the TC, through the 10-year planning process. Over the last week, what we've done, we met with all of the MPOs in the state, both to talk about the parameters for allocating their subset of the funds and for vetting the list within ours. So, we had those meetings over the course of the kind of Christmas, New Year's week, and worked through, which projects there were to try and minimize surprises. It's not every area is going to get every project they want on a list this size, and that's just the nature of it being, a finite amount of dollars. But the point here is to be able to sort of tick back to the list that we already approved and not have to kind of go through an exercise of coming up with projects anew, which was the whole sort of intended purpose of the 10-year planning exercise. So, there should be no surprises on this list in terms of projects that people knew were in the works. Just to give a couple of examples, right? The sort of infamous Delta dips between Grand Junction and Delta that are on US 50 have been on our list throughout. They're at a point where they are ready to go, and that project is one that is a good candidate to accelerate because it's on the plan and it's done to a point where we'll be able to get it out the door quickly. Another example, we worked with the Pikes Peak area to advance their top priority project, which is shovel ready. So, that one you'll hear about more, but it's again, something that probably would have otherwise been on a future round of 267, which we're able to pull ahead because it's ready. The Region 1 dollars we should talk about a little differently because most of those are actually getting sub-allocated to Dr. Cog by nature of the formula that was used. But, it's all projects like that where there are things that have been fully vetted in the past that then are able to go out the door as part of this package. And it will be followed by, being able to pull ahead more projects as we get to 267 year 3. Does that answer your question a bit at the front end?
Mostly. I'm surprised though that the noise wall maintenance was in years 5 to 10 of the 10-year plan. Otherwise, it looks like the others were higher up on the list. And yes. I don't know, I was just kind of surprised at some of what was on the plan and not surprised at others, so.
Yeah, and then the noise wall is a bit of an exception, and there's a reason for that, which is that most of the Region 1 projects that are on the in-years of the 10-year plan are much larger. So, we can't build 270 with $10 million, and virtually all of the dollars in Region 1 during the first 4-year period were allocated to Floyd Hill 270, and portions of very big projects that you can't do with this amount of dollars. So in order to maintain regional equity with respect to the Denver region, we had to pull ahead something smaller. So we tried to find something that was sort of straightforward, state of good repair, but that fit the dollar threshold. Because, notwithstanding that, we still hope to do those larger projects in the next couple of years. We felt it was important for everyone, including the Denver region, to have a sort of share that resonated with our overall distribution strategy for this area. So that one, you're right, Commissioners Inc. is a bit of an exception, but that's the reason for it. So with that, I think it might be good to kind of walk through the presentation and get into some of this in a bit more detail. So Rebecca?
All right, Jennifer will pull it up here. Happy New Year, everyone. Okay, if you go right to the next slide, I think Director Liu covered most of the points here, but really our focus today is to walk you through staff's proposal on allocating this Christmas gift of $150 million we received through the federal congressional action. The only point I will highlight a bit here that I don't think Director Liu mentioned was that we have been through the Senate Bill 267 process, keeping a very close eye on regional equity, and have brought to the commission at several different junctures where we are in terms of distributing that 4-year stream of revenue and making sure we hit those equity targets over that 4-year period. And if you'll recall, where we left off with you all was that we were in a place where regions 1, 2, and 3 still needed some additional investments to get to quote unquote equity. But our thought is with these dollars, because they are stimulus dollars, they're meant to help, all of Colorado's economy, that it didn't make sense to really pick back up with Senate Bill 267. So you'll see that we are proposing to allocate these funds to all 5 regions, which again, we think makes a lot of sense just from the economic recovery standpoint. So if you go into the next slide, Jennifer, I will ask Jeff Sudemeyer to help me with these next few slides, and then you will also hear from all the RTDs today as we get to each of their regions. It's really best to hear from them on the specifics of the projects. But here's the overall package, $900 billion for COVID relief. And then this rather of a surprise that happened over the weekend that Congress included $10 billion for surface transportation. I think we'd all talked about sort of earlier in the discussions on this that we weren't seeing any money for surface transportation in the earlier versions. It was largely focused on transit. So this was a weekend development that provided these dollars, and it ends up being about 9.8 billion when there's some set asides for the tribal and territory programs. And I'll show you actually on the next slide how that then flows down. So the funds come through the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. This is, STBG is very population focused and sets some sort of strict percentages based on how those dollars flow according to population centers. So 57% of the funds overall are sort of dictated by population areas of the state. In particular, areas over 200,000 are called out, over 200,000 in population. And for Colorado, that essentially means the Pikes Peak, MPO, Dr. Cog, and the North Front Range. So we'll walk you through those percentages coming up here. Also, really notable for these dollars, there is no state or local match required, which is just tremendous and really helps sort of boost the economic recovery nature of these dollars. And they also provide some eligibilities for maintenance, salaries, and operations. So we have a lot of flexibility here with these funds in particular. Not so with a little bit of money from the fiscal year 21 approach. That more follows the traditional rules we're very used to at this point. You go to the next slide. Okay, so you take that 9.8 billion and due to a formula which we could talk a lot about in terms of the Colorado share, we receive 1.37%. So that comes out to about 134 million in change for Colorado. And then if you flow those dollars through the sort of requirements I mentioned earlier that are set on population, you can see the result there where about almost 49 million needs to go to the 3 major MPO areas. Then there are other allocations to the small urban areas between 5 and 200,000, to our most rural areas, populations under 5,000. And then that leaves about 57 million that can be spent anywhere in the state. And then we've taken that 48 million there and broken it down at the bottom according to the percentages. So you've got 36 million going to DRCOG, 8.5 to PPACG, and 4 million to North Front Range. If you go to the next slide. So this then would take that 134 million, and like I mentioned earlier, apply the equity formula, the same one we used originally to set the Senate Bill 267 targets. And this is sort of that RPP midpoint, the split the baby approach to dividing up the dollars across the state, across the 5 regions. So we take that 134 million, apply that RPP midpoint, and you can see the percentages flow there. And then the 3 mandatory allocations to DRCOG, PPACG, and North Front Range are called out. So within, take for instance, Region 1, the equity formula would apply about $45.9 million to Region 1. 36 of that goes to DRCOG, which leaves about 9.8 million that is sort of the CDOT, under the CDOT discretion to apply. And Director Liu mentioned earlier that with that amount of money, it did constrain a bit what we could do with these stimulus dollars in order to get them out on the street. All right, go to the next slide. All right, I will have Jeff speak to the approps bill here.
Sure, thanks, Rebecca. So at the same time Congress passed the stimulus, they passed the fiscal year 21 appropriations package. We've been on a continuing resolution for fiscal year 21 up until the point that they could pass a complete appropriations package. So they passed the THUD bill, which includes transportation, housing, and urban development. And as they have done in the last couple of years, Congress included some additional funds in fiscal year 21 above what we would get simply by the current Authorization Act. That includes about 8.75 million in additional STBG formula funding. That includes about 6 million in additional bridge funds. These funds will require the normal state local match. They don't come with the special provisions that Rebecca outlined that apply to the stimulus fund. But you know, taken together, they're about another 15 million to add to the pot, so to speak, to that 134, 135 that Rebecca mentioned previously. There was also some funding included in the appropriations bill for scenic byways and for a competitive grant funding program, although we haven't seen any specific details come out of USDOT yet regarding what those programs will look like. I'll just note that when Rebecca ran through the tables before, those tables basically were just based on the stimulus dollars. But what we're going to look through in the next few slides are also intended to basically program the STBG. The reason we didn't include it in the slides was just recognizing that our stimulus figures were estimates at this point, and recognizing that anytime we make a list, we often go over a little bit. So that supplemental 21 funds are essentially included in the program that Rebecca's going to walk through. We're kind of looking at this as a whole package.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Jennifer, if you go to the next slide. So what we have for you this morning is really meant to be a comprehensive economic recovery package for transportation. And it consists of really sort of 3 sets of pieces. We've got the straight stimulus dollars, the 134 million. We have a plan to use at least a portion of the fiscal year 21 approps dollars, leaving a little bit of money, as Jeff mentioned, in case we have some projects that are a little bit over, so we have some flexibility there. And then you'll also see here that we're proposing to continue the Revitalizing Main Streets program, as well as some small investments to make sure that we're continuing to modernize NEPA. We've learned a lot through the COVID period, in fact, on a better approach to public outreach. And so we've got a little bit of an opportunity there. So those are sort of the three areas you'll see in this package. And I think all the other points here we've already touched on, a focus on getting these dollars out right away. And in fact, we have looked for projects that are ready to go to add from February to April, so very quickly, so that we can get these dollars out into the economy within just a couple months. We're pulling projects from the 10-year plan to keep our eye on that ball, which also included a real focus on asset management. So you'll see some proposals here to, for instance, really improve some of the conditions of our bridges around the state. Distribute the dollars equitably. I talked about that already. And then these last points here around the revitalizing program that's really helping communities through COVID and modernizing Nepa. So that was our sort of guiding principles to prepare this presentation for you all. I will turn now to the region by region proposals, and then we've got a slide toward the end that talks about some of the kind of supplemental dollars, and then talk about next steps. So I don't believe Paul is on, but Jessica Mickelbust, can you cover Region 1?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm Jessica Mickelbust, one of the deputy directors for Paul Jositis. So first of all, talking about the noise wall maintenance. So the noise wall sound replacement will occur along I-70 between I-25 and approximately Wadsworth. And if you've ever driven that portion of I-25, you've noticed the wooden barriers that they're weathered, they're warping, they're cracking, they've fallen over. And essentially what happens with these wooden barriers is that they need full replacement rather than spot repairs. The majority of these were built in the early 1970s. So if you think of your fence in your backyard, if you had built it about 40 years ago, what kind of condition it would be in. And so that's kind of the condition that we're seeing with these barriers. They're almost ineffective because they fall over and leaving gaps in the noise wall protective area. So we've also seen and had some calls where the panels have fallen down, and they're also acting as a barrier for people going onto the highway. So we've had some calls about kids accessing the highway right away in areas where those panels have fallen over. So just generally, they're in great disrepair, and you kind of have to fix all of them when you pull them down. So what we're looking at is replacing the noise walls with a steel post and steel concrete panel. And essentially this can be done without impacting the traveling public. So that was one of the benefits when we started looking at delivering these quickly. They're already in place. We can pull them down and just put them right back up in their new condition. So we don't have to impact the traveling public. There's very little design required. They'll be replaced kind of in kind, the same location, same height, and same linear feet. So we're looking at approximately 10,000 linear feet of this wooden wall sound replacement along I-70. The aesthetics of replacing this will be incredibly beneficial. I drive this corridor regularly, and it's quite an eyesore. So I think we'll get some good compliments, hopefully, from the public once these are replaced with a better looking wall that also we can make a little bit graffiti resistant. The wooden fences really require a lot of maintenance to maintain and remove graffiti in the area. So that was our proposal for Region 1. And the wooden sound walls really don't have a committed funding source, which is why they've been in a state of disrepair. They don't really have a dedicated asset fund. So it really came into play positively with this flexible funding opportunity that we had for these wooden sound wall replacements. And
Can I interrupt you and say Commissioner Zick has a question or comment specific to this noise wall issue, I think.
Yes, thank you. Responding sort of to all of the comments that we received is, why are we doing these kinds of projects? Is part of it that a $9.7 million project is going to pump $9.7 million into the economy, not just benefit CDOT. And I think people are not grasping that, and we're not talking about that positive impact on the economy beyond it was mentioned in the first bullets of like move quickly, but maybe we just need to emphasize that more, or am I mistaken?
I think you're absolutely correct. In fact, we're able to use a different contractor than we normally would for like roadway repair for these wooden sound wall replacements. It's a very quick turnaround. So we are absolutely able to put some boots on the ground really quick with a different contractor type than we would normally be using for like a resurfacing project or something.
Yeah, I think that kind of information would help us explain why this and how does it positively impact the broader economy.
I would just also add there, Commissioner, I cut my teeth in the government affairs office working for Herman. And I would tell you the amount of calls we get about these walls, particularly the communities who live right up against the highway and regularly have these walls fall over. So it really is a help to those neighborhoods that have to deal with these on a day-to-day basis. And we should probably talk more about that.
And I've got a stacking order here, but I did want to say that I know on I-25, there's so much debris and dirt and pollution that comes across that highway that these walls also sort of eliminate some of that pollution going into those housing units that are right adjacent to that. So it's not just a safety issue, but it's also an environmental issue in that it doesn't let all that particulate go straight across the highway and into those neighborhoods. There is some barrier there for that. I have, if you don't mind, Jessica, your presentation is eliciting some requests for comments. I have Commissioner Adams, then Beatty, then Stanton.
Jessica, first of all, thank you for that. And I agree with the notion of trying to put more of these noise walls. And my question is, what can we do? What can we say to the community and to the other people in the state to say why this is more important than other things that the comments indicate that people would rather see us do? More transit kind of initiatives, more walking kind of initiatives, more riding, other things that people might personally see as being more beneficial to them during this particular time. And given the past year we've had, there are just other things that people might say, oh, why are you doing this with the money as opposed to other things, particularly the rapid transit kind of initiative. So can you talk to what's your plan for how do you address some of those concerns?
So I can take this one, Commissioner Adams. That's a fantastic question, and I think a really important one to dig into. There's a couple of things that I would point to in answering that. One is that there actually is separate transit funding in the bill, such that RTD in particular is going to get almost as much money as we did. So there will be an allocation of that to CDOT, mostly for our pass-through transit agencies. It's much smaller, but there is somewhere on the order of $120 to $130 million in transit funding that is separate from this funding that came through the federal bill. So that, I think there ought to be a public conversation about how that money gets spent to advance exactly what you're talking about. We obviously won't be the only party involved in that conversation, but there is, we need to not look at this money in a vacuum. So I think that's one point. I think another is, we were trying to sort of thread a bit of a delicate needle between kind of things that were originally in the plan and making sure that they're responsive to the moment. And I think one of the issues that's really salient with this project is that it's a significant environmental justice issue to be able to sort of help to provide neighborhoods adjacent to highways with the, aesthetic, environmental, air benefits that come with better separation from the highway, right? There's not that many things we can do when neighborhoods abut the highway to mitigate the impacts, and having good sound walls, it's less sexy than some of the other types of investments, but it has a huge impact on neighborhoods living, in proximity to the highway. So I would connect it to environmental justice too in that respect. The other thing that I think is really important here is that most of the money that is going to the Denver region, we are sub-allocating to Dr. Cog. So, there's a total, of over $36 million that we are going to be sub-allocating to the MPO to then sub-allocate to local governments. And, I think we are planning to strongly encourage them to use that money for multimodal priorities. But, because of the local control element of that, it's not going to be dictated by us which projects they are. So, something we could do, Commissioner Adams, is we are going to be giving, and one of the things that we're going to propose to you is that we submit formal guidance to the MPOs in the next week or two about the timeline on which they have to spend the funds. We could, we could be a little more forceful in encouraging them to use the money for multimodal priorities, because that's actually most of the money in the Denver area that is coming through this package.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Liu. Director Liu. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Beatty and then Stanton.
Yeah, after all the comments and feedback on this, I'm supportive of the project now for the noise walls. I do think we need to make sure after the comments we received this morning that this is partly economic stimulus to help the overall COVID response. It's not directly related to the health impacts of COVID, but the overall economic impacts of COVID. So that's part of the funding that we need to make sure is kept to the forefront also on these projects. Just kind of a question when I was going through the list of projects and things was for the Dr. Cog region. I'm not real clear on all their planning process and things, but just having gone through Bennett a lot and seeing the development and growth out there and not seeing a whole lot being put in by CDOT on Highway 79 and 36 through that small community that's just exploding along I-70 East. And just was wondering if there's any maintenance dollars and things that could be moved on to some of the rural areas of Region 1. Because Dr. Cog, it seems like a lot of these projects are on the really big projects, and some of these smaller communities on the east side that are experiencing growth and are kind of the interface between the rural ag community and the trucking and things that are needed for all that with the growing population growth in those areas. And I think we need to, just as a commission, need to be aware that we need to try to address some of those impacts in some of those areas for safety and trying to minimize the negative impacts by increased congestion and things as these communities continue to grow outside of that core Denver region. So just some comments I'd like Region 1 to look at. Off to the east side, it seems like we're a little behind on some of that for the east side of Denver.
Thank you. Director Liu, you want to comment, and then I have Commissioner Stanton.
I actually just typed my comment, but I can articulate it for everybody. I was just thinking
Awesome.
about the comments that had just been made about explaining the nexus to COVID. Another piece of this related to the air pollution issue is that there's been quite a lot of research in the last few months about people who live in communities that are adjacent to significant air pollutants like highways being more susceptible to severe cases of COVID-19 because of long-term exposure to particulate matter, especially. So doing something to kind of help to buffer communities from highways has a specific COVID nexus as well that we should probably mention. But sorry, I didn't think of that before.
Great. Commissioner Stanton.
Thanks, Chair Stewart. I was basically going to say what Director Liu said because Kimberly Morse in her public comment mentioned this. So we have an environmental justice piece. Also down there, as you're heading east-west on 70, there is an increasing homeless problem. And as Director or Deputy Director Mickelbush said, this will help the flow and maybe have a better safety impact and protect the communities down there. So I appreciate the work the staff has put into this. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you'd like to continue, please, Jessica.
I don't think I have anything else to mention except on the remainder of our slide, you'll see our larger projects that are on the years 1 through 4 that Director Liu and Rebecca have already mentioned, that they're just, given the type of funds that we've just received and the size of these projects and their status and their design and planning, are just not the right projects at this point in time. And that's where we really landed with the noise wall project. So that's all I had.
Thanks, Jessica. And so I'll just add, you'll see this table structure used for all the regions, really. And part of the reason we're doing that is we hope to be back to you in just a couple of months to talk about year 3 of Senate Bill 267. So we wanted to show both the proposed project for these stimulus dollars, but also just remind ourselves and you all of what's next on that list, so that we're continuing to track towards full delivery of that years 1 through 4 of Senate Bill 267. And we're still very much on track to deliver that in Region 1 with the initial investments we've already made in these corridors and what's sort of penciled in for years 3 and 4. So just a note, you'll see that structure throughout, and that's what that table's meant to show. All right, we'll move over to Region 2 then. And I'll turn this to Rich Zamora.
All right, good morning, commissioners. Happy New Year to you all. So the project that Region 2 is proposing is what you see in front of you. It's State Highway 21 and Research Parkway interchange. This is in Colorado Springs. Highway 21 is kind of a loop route alternative to I-25. And, you know, some of the thoughts that we had going into selecting this particular project was, number one, you know, again, as you've heard, what do we have ready and on the shelf that can meet these advertisement timelines that's on our 10-year plan? And also looking at the equity within the region in terms of funding that we've had available to us to date via Senate Bill 267 and other programs. And so this particular project was planned to be advertised last summer until we ran into our economic issues with COVID. And so, you know, given the amount of available funding that we had within the region, we haven't been able to deliver on this project. This project is, you know, roughly $44 million. It is Pikes Peak COG's #1 priority. And then from an equity perspective within the region, from Senate Bill 267, they're very far behind the curve, just because of the, similar to Region 1, the price tag of some of their projects, you know, and the flow of cash as we've had available to us. It's been difficult to be able to even do anything on this project in terms of bringing it to construction. So with that being said, you know, I think one of the benefits of actually going forward with this project right now is, as you saw in one of the earlier slides, Pikes Peak COG is getting $8.5 million directly passed through to CDOT from this funding. They have agreed, at least in concept, although their board hasn't voted yet, to support using their $8.5 million allocation to supplement this project. And then we would come up with the rest of the money. Number one, from our $17 million of STBG equivalent that's coming from the COVID relief bill. And then also requesting a loan from the Transportation Commission program reserve of $18 million to actually complete this, which we would pay back when year 3 of Senate Bill 267 becomes available to us. So the net positive of this is the project was intended to initially be delivered using $44 million roughly of Senate Bill 267. We're essentially getting an $8.5 million discount on this project because of Pikes Peak COG's, you know, agreement to pursue using their $8.5 million towards this. The other big thing this accomplishes for the region is it brings that equity perspective, you know, back more in alignment of where it should be from Pikes Peak COG. You know, they're very far behind the curve in terms of dollars have been made available to their group, whereas some of our other planning regions that I've heard this morning at STAC, you know, had some concerns about, you know, what projects, you know, one in particular being Lamar, US 287 and Lamar, and why that wasn't being built instead of this. You know, again, from during the last round of projects that were selected in April through about June, you know, Lamar did get a piece of their top priority project, which was US 287 south of Lamar. We weren't able to build the entire thing, but we built a stretch of it. And so from an equity perspective, in terms of dollars, they're actually a little bit ahead of the curve right now, along with some other projects that we programmed. You know, and similarly, there's some other planning regions I understand had some comments. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend STAC this morning. But, you know, similarly, some of those have either gotten a large project in their area and they're pretty close to being in equity. And there's a couple other ones that are just too expensive. But some of those other projects, like in Central Front Range, Highway 115 will be on our year 3 Senate Bill 267 list. And so we think this is actually an opportunity to essentially get a discount on a big project, deliver it sooner rather than later, and meet the #1 priority of the Pikes Peak COG region. So
Madam Chair, Bill Tebow, I wonder if I could ask a question.
Absolutely.
This goes to probably Herman more than Rich. I was listening in on the STAC meeting this morning, and there was some discussion about the $8.5 million coming from a different source. And I wasn't too clear about that. I didn't interrupt and ask a question then, but Herman, can you kind of help bring me up to date on that? I'm just wondering if it comes from another source, what happens to the $8.5 million that's anticipated here?
Yeah, I think Shoshana can handle that one. I'll give that over to her.
So I can explain this, and there's a bit of a technicality that's a meaningful one where we're proposing to allow a color of money change because of the very significant match that the MPO is putting into our project in this case. So one of the nuances of the money that came from the feds is that it does not require 80-20 match from Fed and non-Fed sources. So normally, if you have if you have $100, right, 20 of them have to come from non-federal sources to match the federal funds. Because of the nature of the pandemic shortfalls that are being faced across the country, this money is more flexible in that regard. But that difference potentially makes more of a difference to local governments than to us, because we thankfully are able to manage the match issue because of the share of non-federal funds that come into our budget. So, the discussion with Pikes Peak was that they're willing to put the equivalent of their funds in as match to help get this project going, but they asked if they could switch it so that they use federal funds that require the match for our project, which then allows them to use the more flexible funds for smaller projects in local jurisdictions that may be struggling to meet match. So the net to us is identical, but the flexibility of these funds in particular relative to other dollars, which will make more of a difference to, potentially to some of these smaller projects, can be utilized in that way. So, I think our feeling was we didn't want to, we want to be very clear about what we're doing with this money, because the purpose of this money is to stimulate the economy and get out the door quickly. But we felt that because Pikes Peak was coming forward with a match that is really above and beyond in a lot of ways, we could make that that sort of technical adjustment to allow them some of the benefits because of the color of money. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
And Rich, there is a statement on the comment chat from Commissioner Stanton regarding the loan from TC Program Reserve, which is about 18 million to be paid back if we get year three COPs. Maybe this is for Shoshana. So we would have to agree to that in another action item, and maybe have a clear understanding of what the program reserve has left in it and what that 18 million loan, how that would affect the program reserve.
Yes, that's an important question. And I think our feeling was that doing that $18 million temporary allocation from the program reserve would leave sufficient balances in the reserve. And maybe Jeff can talk a little bit about what we foresee in the reserve over the next couple of months. But, we wouldn't feel comfortable doing a lot of shifts from the reserve of that magnitude. But for this one, given all of the reasons Rich has described, and frankly, the opportunity to advance a medium-sized project of this importance in this package, we felt like it was prudent to do it in this one instance, particularly given the regional equity challenges with Pikes Peak last year, but also given that there's sort of a unique opportunity here to get a pretty big project that's really ready to go out the door, moving quickly.
Thank you.
And that's right. We'll bring a separate action to you at the regular meeting. So at your regular TC meeting in January, that's when we'd ask you to approve that $18 million loan. To give you a few quick numbers, we've got about 70 million in the reserve. We're setting about 27 million of that aside currently to help us balance the 22 budget. So that leaves about, I think, around 44 million, I believe, as being available currently that could help fund that 18 million.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, Rich, any other comments on this slide? If not, we can move to the remaining to-do list for Region 2.
Not unless there's any more comments about or questions about this particular project and what it accomplishes. But it's what you see in front of you is you've got a rendering of essentially what the interchange is going to look like. It's going to be a diverging diamond with Powers Boulevard, with Research Park Wiggle underneath Powers Boulevard. So.
Thank you, Rich. And you know, one of the things I think maybe we should do is make sure we highlight anywhere where it says improve safety, because that's one of the things that our comments have been related to is we want you to spend this money and also toward Vision Zero. And anytime that we're looking at any of these things that would affect either, you know, pollution or safety or any of those things, maybe if we just highlight that so that anybody reading our documents can pick that up pretty fast.
Okay, great. We'll do that.
Thank you. Thanks, Rebecca.
Yeah, thanks. Okay.
And so, you know, similar to Region 1, we have a number of projects that were intended to be funded, you know, in future years of Senate Bill 267. And we have a listing of those. And there's a number of these projects that are actually on our $500 million list that Commission saw back, I believe, in July. And so, you know, our hope is, you know, from that equity perspective that, you know, some of the TPRs and the other areas that didn't get funding out of this will get some of their, you know, bigger projects also funded later on this year and send those to construction as well. So.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. And I'll just echo for those of you who joined STAC this morning. We did want to make sure and bring this full set of slides, exactly what you all are seeing to STAC. And we did hear some comments from the Central Front Range and Southeast TPR, but if you look at this list, you see the two of the projects that came up this morning are right on the queue for the next set of funding, that State Highway 115 in Central Front Range, and at the bottom there, the US 287 Lamar. It was really good to get the comments from STAC this morning, but I think we've got a great plan in place to make sure that we deliver these projects just within the next couple of months when the year $3 in. Okay, I'll turn us then to Region 3, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Mike Goolsby.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sorry, I was going to, hopefully this works. I was having issues with my camera earlier. So we have two projects. Basically, Shoshana spoke eloquently of the US 50 to Grand Junction Delta to repairs, affectionately known as the Delta Dips. This project is one that is on the 267 list. It's on our plan. This would afford us the opportunity to advance it. And this is a huge safety project in addition to fixing some severe dips and bumps between Delta and Grand Junction, which I think adds to the economic impact. We get lots of complaints and we'd get lots of comments from folks in Delta and the folks in Grand Junction and the freight folks. And then in addition to that, this would afford us the opportunity to take the 267 year $3 and put them towards other projects moving forward. It'd also give us the opportunity to kind of even out the equity between our MPO and the other three TPRs. And part of the reason for that is we had to take money from the MPO to be able to match the Vail Pass infra grant. So our focus was basically around the MPO area. This puts more equity upon all three TPRs in the MPO. And then this gives us an opportunity to move forward with the US 6 Fruita to Palisade projects, which is actually 5 projects, but this is one of them. We're in discussions with the MPO right now about the Clifton project and how we would fund that specifically. They may want to swap some funds out, but right now would be our proposal is to be able to fund the US 6 Clifton project, which is part of the larger project. And I would open that up to any questions at this point, Rebecca.
This is Kathy, and I can address that one if it's all right with you, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
this particular project is certainly safety. And it's also kind of an economic development. It's an area that really needs improved for the economic development portion of it. It's an area that the community has tried very hard to get the improvements out there to have more economic development in that area. And so this is both economic development, safety. This is also school involved, and it's very unsafe getting to this school. So it's very much a safety and an economic development, and it's an area that really needs a lot of help bringing it up to a higher level. And so this is a really good project for Mesa County.
Thank you.
Okay, Jennifer, if you could go to the next slide. Mike, I don't know if you want to speak to this, but this is essentially the queue of projects identified for Senate Bill years 267, years 3 and 4.
Yeah, Rebecca, I think the only thing that I would throw out there is the one project that's on here that would finish off State Highway 13 is the State Highway Garco Rio Blanco Hill project. That's a pretty important project to the region, but the majority of our stuff probably with year 3 would be the rural paving stuff to get us back in alignment with the rural paving projects and still be able to deliver something in each one of the TPRs and the MPOs. So other than that, I don't think I have anything else, Rebecca.
Okay. All right, thanks, Mike. Okay, I'll turn us to Region 4 then.
Okay, great. Good morning, commissioners. You'll hear a similar theme as to the previous RTDs with a strong focus on project readiness, as well as equity and staying consistent with what's on our 10-year plan and even advancing projects on our Senate Bill 267 list. So the first project is our Berthoud Mobility Hub. That is a project that is part of Segment 6 on I-25, which is currently funded. However, we only had partial funding for the Mobility Hub, which was going to put in all the underground infrastructure, but all of the infrastructure on top, so to speak, which would includes all the bus stops and the lanes to make the Mobility Hub functional on opening day is not funded. And so 6.5 is planned to go to that so we can open up that Mobility Hub on the I-25 corridor. The next 2 projects are out of our Senate Bill 267 list of projects. They are rural paving projects. One is on I-70. It includes panel replacements as well as some diamond grinding on that corridor. It's a feasible and a sizable project. And then we also have the 385 project. This is a big priority to Eastern Colorado. This is a safety project. It includes adding 6-foot shoulders on this heavily traveled freight corridor. The next project is part of the State Highway 119 corridor project. This was on our 267 list of projects, and that was a $30 million capital project. That project includes bus rapid transit as well as operational improvements at the intersections. And one of those ways to improve mobility along that corridor is to install adaptive signals. That was always in the plan. And so this would be sort of advancing a portion of that corridor project. The next 3 projects are really focused around asset management. We do have a lot of timber bridges in Region 4 in need of repair to keep the longevity. I mean, ideally, these bridges would eventually be replaced, but as we know, we don't have enough funds to replace all the bridges. So these fixes are our maintenance crews would do. They would add steel plates and extend the longevity of those timber bridges. The X-Lite guardrail end replacements, that's something that's been required through FHWA. These are end treatments that are they are no longer standard, and we do not have enough funds currently to go in and replace all of those end treatments. So this $1.6 million infusion would help replace most of those in treatments across the region. And then we have a local agency project through Dr. Cog. This is at the intersection of State Highway 7 and 119. This is in conjunction with the PEL study that's going along State Highway 7, but this intersection improvements includes safety improvements, on-street bike lanes, some sidewalk connectivity, interim queue jumps for transit, and then obviously is coordinating with the future BRT stop locations. And then a portion of Region 4's funding is going to be is controlled through the North Front Range. And so there's 3 projects there. Again, that first one on Larimer County Road 17, that is a shoulder expansion for bike lanes. There's an intersection safety improvement at 257 and Eastman Parkway, and then a Timberline corridor improvements, which is also, it's a widening project as well as including bike and pedestrian mobility connections. And again, these were projects selected by the North Front Range Council as far as their projects ready to go, and they would really be swapping out their STPG funds that are currently in the North Front Range to use these STPG stimulus funds. And that's the list of projects. If there's any questions, I think Kathleen maybe had a question.
Commissioner Brackley.
Great, thank you, Heather and Chair Stewart. Appreciate the chance to just weigh in on this real quickly. And I want to start by saying how much I appreciate all of the context setting for this and the importance of identifying these projects for each of the regions that align with the statewide goals and continuing to use that as our North Star. I think that's really important in the 10-year pipeline of projects. And I also want to support to get these dollars out quickly into our economy and to live into the purpose and the intent of the stimulus money. I do recognize though that makes this challenging. This whole process has been challenging and kind of a whirlwind for everyone listening into the staff meeting this morning. Certainly all of this came forward very quickly over the holidays. So I appreciate all the work that's gone into creating this and again, trying to create a portfolio of projects that respects those overarching goals for our economy and then getting the funding out throughout the state. I think this particular list for Region 4 does a good job balancing the needs for both the more urbanized areas of the region, as well as creating funding for the rural projects, and seeing the rural paving projects on the list is helpful. I think similar to a question or suggestion that was made a few minutes ago, it would be helpful, I think, on the rural paving projects to also note that those are safety projects, because I think when people just see rural paving, they don't really understand the full magnitude of the project and the goals that they connect back to. So so that would be a suggestion. I think, again, similar to what's been said on in the other regions and the conversation at STAC, all of us wish there was more money. There was more money as a whole throughout the state, and there was more money for each of the regional priorities. And including the interstates, and from my own perspective, from the interstates and transit, I wish there was more funding. But I do think this list strikes a good balance and brings forward a combination of projects that align with our statewide goals. I have some other comments and suggestions, but I'll save those for later when we're talking about the overall process. But I just wanted to state my support for this particular list, and then hopefully there's more opportunity for subsequent conversations with our MPO partners and with the STAC members as we talk about subsequent sources of funding, either through the state or subsequent federal processes, so we can have more engagement on this in advance. But again, thank you for the work and trying to expedite the money. So thank you.
Yes, and Shoshana, you have some comments here you'd like to interject here.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I was going to request that we go back to Region 3 for a minute, because Mike and Rebecca, I think, have been going back and forth with the staff and the MPO about a possible shift in order that won't change the net projects, but I just want to explain it all here because it would be better to not have surprises later. Do you want to go back one slide prior?
Yeah, I apologize about that. I was trying to get it done before our slide, Shoshana.
No, it's okay. I know you've been figuring this out in real time. Better to catch it now.
So I apologize, commissioners, for having to go back to Region 3, but the Clifton project, the proposal from the MPO and from staff would be to take the funds available for the Clifton project, put them into the I-70 Phase 5 project, I-70B Phase 5 project, which would allow us the opportunity to make sure that we get this money out in a hurry, and then take the same amount of funds out of the I-70B Phase 5 project and put towards Clifton so that we can make sure that we hit all the right-of-way issues that we're going to have out there. Wouldn't slow the time frame of delivery down. It will just make sure that we get it right. So hopefully that quick explanation makes it simple. If not,
so what you're proposing, Mike, is to flip the source of money so that these dollars go to the I-70B project that is about to go out to bid in February. And then the dollars that would have otherwise gone to the I-70B project go to the Clifton project a couple of months later.
Correct.
It just resequences them. And
Yep.
can you remind commissioners what the source of the I-70B funds are?
It's surface treatment, faster safety. It's all region funds. So those funds are very flexible to be able to do that, to put towards the Clifton, because Clifton also qualifies for quite a bit of faster safety. So it'd just afford us the opportunity to have a little bit more time to make sure that Clifton's right.
Okay, so to be meticulous about how we're talking about the stimulus funds would be used on the I-70B project, but it would allow us to move some of those funds to the Clifton project in a couple of months.
Correct, same amount.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Bill Tebow, where are these projects listed? I understand the
Page
flip, but I just
17.
I don't know where they are on the lists.
Commissioner Tebow, to answer that, we would add the I-70B Phase 5 project because it was not a 267 project. It was on the 1 through 4 year plan. But we would add that to the next proposal that comes back to all of you to show that. Again, my apologies on the shortness of I was texting and emailing this morning with the MPO and with our staff, and I just got the information same time I was presenting and a little bit afterwards.
I-70B is in the plan though.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's in the 1 to 4 year plan. It's just not on the 267 list because we funded it with regional dollars.
Okay. Clear as mud?
I don't know if that answered Commissioner Tebow's question or not.
Well, you know, it really did. It didn't, but I'm not going to dwell on it. I'm just trying to figure out what's on the screen, or what was on the screen. I think under Region 3, we have that. Yeah. So nope. Back
No,
one more.
the one before.
It's not on the screen because it was already funded.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out what we
Yeah.
are looking at on the screen. If that figure is going to change, or if projects are going to change.
The project. So what would, and I'm, this is happening in real time, but what they're proposing is that the 5.6 would go towards a project that's not on the screen, but that is in the plan. It's currently funded in the plan, so it would shift the funding source for the existing project and free up the other funds to pay for this project that is on the screen.
Gotcha. Thank you.
My apologies, Commissioner.
I think they're just concerned about hitting the deadline, the aggressive deadline for these funds with the second project here, right, Mike?
That is correct, Shoshana.
Okay. But it doesn't net change which projects are going to get done this year.
Correct.
Okay. All right, if I can, then I'll return us to Region 4. The last slide, if you just go back one, Jennifer, just the same structure again, where we go forward to 15, where we want to continue to track what's left to do, particularly in the years 1 through 4 list, So this is the list of outstanding projects for Region 4 that are in the queue, and we will be coming to you in just a couple months to talk about moving these forward, starting years with the year 3 and 4 allocation. Okay. Mr. McVah, if we want to move to Region 5.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Okay, good.
Yes.
So Region 5, we get about $10 million in the stimulus plan right now. We're still working very closely with our priority list with the TPRs, and McCabe Creek has been very high on the priority list for a number of years. This is a resiliency project that we've wanted to do for quite some time. If we lose these culverts under US 160 in Pagosa, not only do we have a severe flooding issue in Pagosa, but we lose 160 to a majority of Region 5. So the $7.5 million would be our primary to replace the failing culverts with a concrete box culvert. So that would be our first project that we would be putting out early in May of this year. The next one is State Highway 141, north of Natarita. This is a project that we've always had planned. In order to get this project out, we're grouping funds together, and we had to advance FY22 funds to be able to put that project out this year. And so rather than using the advanced funding, we would use the stimulus funds to go ahead and advertise that. As you can see, we've got our advertisement date already underway with bid opening coming here very shortly. So we're going to swap that money to free up FY22 funds, and then we will use those FY22 funds to move forward existing surface treatment projects that we're planning. And much like you're talking about, any of these projects that we're doing and focusing on the safety side of things, we're always looking at, one, we smooth the roadway up, improve the asset. Smoothing the roadway up actually helps make the road safer, adding rumble strips, adding new striping to these roads. And then where possible, if we're grouping this with Senate Bill 267 funds, and we can, we're adding shoulders to help widen them out a little bit more. But that's primarily the focus for Region 5 with that limited funding that we get, and what we want to do moving forward. Any questions? Okay.
All right, Mike, do you want to touch on anything on the next slide on just what's left?
So most of what we have here, is majority of this is rural paving projects that we want to do with Senate Bill 267, 3 and 4. 149 is a partnering project. So you actually saw this project also on Region 3's list. They have $12 million there. We have $16 million to do a pretty substantial project on 149 between Creed and Lake City. So that would really button up that road for quite a while. That hasn't had treatments over for many years. 550 Pocket Shoe Puck is actually an asset project, but also adding some passing lane work and trying to improve that project a little bit more. So it has a capital element in it, but it's mostly asset work. 160 Aztec Creek is one of the projects that FY22 money could help roll forwards to try to get that project done. And we've reconstructed just about every stretch of road in the Ute Mountain Ute tribal area, and this is the last segment for us to complete in that area. County Road 370 is a project that we wouldn't be touching at all if we didn't have Senate Bill 267 money coming forwards. And so we want to take advantage of that and move forwards to get a treatment on that road. US 550 Billy Creek, another rural paving surface treatment project. And we're going to add shoulders to that project. Big ask that Ridgeway and Uray really wanted to see because of the bike activity that's along that roadway. US 50 north of 285. This is paving up towards Monarch Pass. We've paved the east side of Monarch. This year we're paving the west side of Monarch, but we haven't covered everything down towards Pagosa or Poncha Springs. And so this $3.5 million would help to do that. And then we want to group that with the project underneath, which is 50 and 285 intersection, and reconstructing that intersection to make a long-term improvement there with a big congestion problem, particularly with the summer tourism, the rafting industry and all. This intersection needs some additional help. And then Colorado 114 is a project that we're partnering with Region 3 again to combine funds to resurface that roadway basically between US 50 and US 285 and really try to do a substantial improvement on that.
So Mike, can you explain a little bit to everyone how funding the first two projects will allow us to accelerate some of these in the 267 year 3 allocation?
So Region 5, one of our mantras that we consistently do is, you know, we'll pull faster money together, surface treatment money together, 267 money together when we have that to try to move these projects forward and make them more financially viable to get good bids in rural Colorado. Because if we come in with a $1 million, $2 million project, sometimes we can't get bidders. So that 141 project on the previous slide, we were doing exactly that, but we didn't know if we were going to get 267 money. That's kind of looming out there. We won't know until March whether we're going to get year 3 money. So we said, let's pull FY22 surface treatment money forwards, and we're borrowing 22 money to get that project out the door now and get it advertised. When stimulus came forwards, we could substitute that stimulus money into that project and put the FY22 money back in place. And that allows us to start jumping into this list and really trying to reach out to those top 3 items, make sure we can fund it. So we're going to still be sitting back here for a little bit and go, all right, are we getting year 3 money, or are we going to pull FY22 money forward to do some of these, the top 3 projects, which is 149, 550, and 160, you know, when can we pull those forward? So stimulus really helps us to make sure they get funded. And then if we can, we'll combine surface treatment and year 3 267 to do those projects as quickly as possible. Does that help, Shoshana?
Yeah, so effectively, just to simplify it a bit, you know, we were doing some of the 10-year plan projects with surface treatment funds. This allows us to put those onto stimulus funds, which will then allow us to revisit those other funds and try and pull other projects ahead.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll be able to then get another round of ticking our way through the list, presumably, particularly once 267 year 3 comes in.
Yeah, and I think the stimulus actually helps us to, instead of looking at a 10 or a 12-year plan with COVID impacts, we might actually get back to 10-year, or even maybe it becomes a 9-year plan because we get a couple extra projects done with stimulus.
Right. So so we put a couple of projects that are ready to go from the 10-year plan on the stimulus list, and then it opens up more money to look at how we get to the rest of our plan.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Okay, just a couple more slides to round out the deck here. So this slide brings us back to the concept I mentioned at the top of the hour, that we're looking for really a comprehensive package here that puts to use the full amount of the stimulus dollars, the little bit of extra from the fiscal year 21 appropriations. And then you'll note a plan here to make sure that we're continuing the Revitalizing Main Street program as well. So just sort of starting from the bottom, the fiscal year 21 appropes included, we think, about $6 million that'll be available for bridges in Colorado. Boy, this money could not have come at a better time, because our bridge program has just finalized a really innovative approach to doing some critical repairs to both our timber bridges, some of which Heather spoke to earlier, and a whole series of bridges along I-70 in the urban area that are in pretty rough shape, to the point where, you know, so pieces of deck have been falling off and falling onto the roads below. But the repair that the bridge program came up with is, you know, very cost effective, $200,000 or $300,000 to get these bridges back into a state of good repair. For some, it actually improves their overall condition for the timber bridges. For the ones in the metro area, it just buys us a whole lot of time before we have the full funding to fully replace these bridges. So what we're proposing is to use that $6 million for those critical repairs. we will have a prioritized list of which structures we'd like to put that money on. And again, that's, you know, $200,000 to $300,000 a structure. So we can really tackle a lot of bridges with that. The second category here, modernizing NEPA. So just a small allocation from the supplemental STBG, the fiscal year 21 appropriate dollars, but really would be helpful for a couple things. One, we'd like to look at some software that would allow us to take a virtual approach to public outreach, at least as an option, and to do that more consistently across the state. Region 1 has piloted an approach to outreach for I-270, which that project kicked off within COVID and is spending a lot of their public input period in the COVID pandemic. And so they've adopted a virtual outreach plan that provides a virtual room, and it's just been phenomenal in terms of the engagement they've gotten from the public, including a lot of Spanish speakers, which has been a struggle for us in the past to really engage Spanish speakers. So we'd like to grab that capability and make it available for all the other regions. And then also just make sure that we have all the tools in place we need to run our greenhouse gas and travel models to be ready to implement the greenhouse gas roadmap and some upcoming regulation. And then the top item, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, Commissioner Brackey has a comment when you're finished with your presentation.
Okay, thanks, Chair. The top item there is would be to continue the Revitalizing Main Streets program. We'll fund that with a fund swap with DTR and free up right away $2 million to make sure that this program is fully funded through the winter season to help communities through COVID. Let me pause there and take the question from Commissioner Brackey, if that's okay.
Thank you, Rebecca. And this is helpful. I guess these are another question that I have has to do with these kind of overarching funding sources. And I really appreciate the continued support for Revitalizing Main Streets. I think that has been a really successful program and great to continue adding dollars to that. One of the questions that I have is, could there be funding identified either through that line item or some other separate line item for transit related projects across the state? When I look at our unfunded list of projects for the statewide plan and the 10-year plan, we've talked a lot today about our highway projects, but each of those lists for each of our regions also includes a transit list of projects, and many of those remain unfunded as well. So I don't know all the details about the eligibility for this federal stimulus money, but could there be something similar to Revitalizing Main Streets that could be made available statewide for communities to apply for transit and or transportation demand management type programs? So not the physical infrastructure pieces, but the programmatic and mobility services to complement those. And I'm curious how that could fit into this mix.
Thanks, Commissioner. I might look to David Krutzinger to help here as well. I know right now we're actually still in the middle of allocating the multimodal options fund dollars, which we're, I think, focused on exactly what you mentioned, and are working with the communities to get those dollars out. David, feel free to add in more here, but I know that getting those dollars out right now have tied up a lot of the local communities, and we've been able to tackle their top projects through those dollars, and as well as the pass-through dollars for transit.
So I guess that would be helpful, David, if there's additional information you could provide on that. And then earlier in the presentation, Director Liu mentioned the federal transit funding that's coming to Colorado. I'm just trying to understand, like, what are the pieces of the puzzle that could come together and augment the funding that's already been identified through your presentation, but could there be additional dollars created for working our way down the various transit lists that are also in our 10-year pipeline? And I understand the multimodal options funds, which is great, but I just want to make sure that transit investment is keeping pace with our highway investment?
Thanks, Commissioner Brackey, for the question. The transit dollars are formalized through FTA's processes. So they'll, in your region, will go directly to Transport and Greeley for decision-making by those organizations with some MPO input. CDOT will receive about $14 million for the 10 rural TPRs and 41 transit agencies to distribute those dollars to. So the dollars in this case are very, very small and unlikely to move the needle on the 10-year pipeline project list.
Okay. I mean, that information is really helpful. I just think it would be great to include that part of the story in the presentation. And I know we're pulling all of this together quickly. But if it isn't this source of money, when we have the upcoming conversations around Senate Bill 267 years 3 and 4, will we also be talking about the transit list in addition to the highway lists that are in the 10-year pipeline? I'm just trying to figure out, if it's not now, how and when will we add this part to the conversation?
I mean, I think a couple things. One, year 3 267 comes with the multimodal allocation, just like years 1 and 2 did. So that, I think we would envision taking up both of those lists as we did last year. The stimulus dollars are a little funky because most of the transit dollars are not coming directly to us, and we candidly don't know yet exactly what allocation we're going to receive through the FTA piece of the funds. So it was fairly straightforward what we would be getting via the highway formula, and so we sort of know that, and we want to push those dollars out the door. But we will probably get something from the transit allocation, and again, RTD will get a lot more, and I assume that there will be a process around whether they use it themselves or some of it goes to pass-throughs. I mean, there are options with those funds too that I assume will get worked through in the next couple of weeks. For our list, the 267 year 3 list, again, we'll have that allocation in it. So, we'll have those conversations together. I'm not quite tracking vis-a-vis revitalizing main streets because actually there's quite broad eligibility in the existing program. So, and there have been, cities and towns that came to us wanting to improve access to, a bus stop, and that has happened. So, there's optionality within that existing program. I think the governor's budget request included a much larger version of this program via the stimulus proposal. So if that came to pass and we were talking about projects that were, more like $1 million, $2 million than 50,000, it obviously opens up what you can do on all fronts. But the idea of that program is to make streets more multimodal. So, I would argue that the eligibility is already pretty broad in that program, as it was in the Safer Main Streets program, where the list that we just put out with Dr. Cog had a pretty significant overlap with transit access. And a lot of those projects are really connected to transit stations and the like. I think I would go back to a point that we talked about a little bit earlier in the discussion, which is that most of the Denver area dollars in particular are not getting spent by us in this instance, but by the MPO. So, one thing we could do here is when we send guidance to Dr. Cog about how we anticipate use of those funds and on what timeline, we can, strengthen the urging for those dollars to go into multimodal investments. And on the Region 4 list, I think our feeling was that the Berthoud Mobility Hub was the one that was most ready to go, and it's in our control because it's our project, so that's why we included that on the list.
Yeah, which is great, and I really appreciate that, and I think that's a good example of a transit supportive project, so I think that's good. What I was wondering about here, and again, it sounds like all of this is playing out and as we speak, but I guess for our upcoming conversations, if you could share how the federal transit process is tracking with this, and maybe by our regular meeting later this month, there'll be more information on like, how's that going to work? I mean, I get it that a lot of the money is going to go to RTD, but there's a lot more transit providers across the state besides RTD. And so hopefully there's a way to allocate that money in a statewide approach that recognizes all the different transit providers, in addition, not diminishing RTD's role, but in addition to RTD, it's all complementary service, and a lot of our people are trying to cross interregional transit trips to get to jobs. So the main crux of my question is, how are we making sure that we're keeping transit in the conversation along with these important highway projects? My specific question around revitalizing main streets was, my familiarity with that program is that it's still infrastructure based. And I don't know if any of that money could be used for example, helping to co-fund first and final mile trips on microtransit, or could it be used for other transportation demand management type programmatic expenses, not just infrastructure expense? Because the infrastructure is critical, but we also need the programs and services to go with it. So I'm trying to understand, is that an eligible expense under revitalizing main streets the way this is envisioned?
Yeah, I would argue that a lot of the Revitalizing Main Streets projects have not been solely infrastructure. I mean, many of them have been about kind of temporary use rather than building. So, if you look through I would suggest that it's worth a look through the kind of cumulative list of projects that have been funded so far, because they're in a good way all over the map in terms of what kinds of choices communities have made about how to use their space. Because it's not a lot of money, right? What you can do in the order of magnitude of $50,000 is real different than you could do with a couple million. But within those bounds, I mean, we've just seen very creative proposals, and candidly, things we didn't think of, where once the request comes in, we've taken them to the Attorney General's office and gotten an opinion on whether we can use them. And we've tried to get to yes, where communities have ideas about what to do with those funds, but it's been very much bottom up in terms of where the creative thinking around that program has come from, kind of deliberately so, because it was something that we did as a partnership with local governments across the state to help them figure out what they need to get through the crisis. So, we have not, I can't think of any hard no's that we have in the guidance for that program, other than that the fixed dollar amount is fairly small because of the nature of what we've been able to do at this phase of the program. And there are a lot of things on that list that do have a transit nexus. I mean, in terms of sort of subsidizing operational functions for transit authorities, more of that has happened through other sources of funds, including our annual allocation from the FTA, which David and his team are working through, and some of our faster transit funds. I mean, those, and I believe we put out guidance in the last month or two, right, David? Correct me if I'm wrong here. Kind of responsive to the survey we had done 6 months ago or so about what those funds could be used for. Maybe it's worth talking about those for a moment, but that's a different source of funds.
Okay.
The FTA stimulus funds, I mean, we just, part of the reason we don't know yet is because we're not the direct recipient of all the funds. So, I think there's more variables that we don't directly control in the kind of question of where those are going.
Okay, I appreciate the information today. I wanted to get this on the table for conversation. It sounds like might need more conversation as we get more clarity going forward, or there might be other sources of money that apply versus the stimulus funds. So I appreciate the information today. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Hickey.
I will, in the interest of time, just say two things. I appreciate staff's response to all of the important commissioner questions, especially related to how we address the issues raised in these public comments. I note that some of these additional investments will flow to address those comments, including modernizing NEPA, which really will flow through many activities going forward, to really engage more public comment, really substantively. So that's all I had for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Rebecca?
We just have the last slide here on next steps. The kind of cadence here is that we would return to you at our regular scheduled meeting in mid-January to implement the formal budget amendment and supplement to add the stimulus dollars in to the budget, and also, if you so choose, to provide the program reserve loan to the Powers Research Project in Region 2. Then shortly after that, in March, we would like to start workshop workshopping Senate Bill 267 year 3 and talking about the issuance of that to be ready in April to receive those dollars and have your final nod. So of course, we will continue to track the stimulus proposal in the governor's budget, which was mentioned earlier. As you'll recall, was money identified there for the Revitalizing and Safer Main Streets programs, as well as I believe about 130 million that would go to projects around the state and some important investments like the Eisenhower Johnson Memorial Tunnel. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that as the legislature convenes, goes out, and then comes back in and have a plan for those dollars as well. So unless Director Liu has more, I will turn it back to you, Chair, for any questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Brackey indicates she has an additional comment.
Thanks. My question had to do with the next step. So thanks for covering this. I guess the question I have in thinking about what's coming to us and when, is there a way to get information out to the public? Because I really appreciated the public comments that came in as part of this conversation. But if there's a way to create lead time so the public, so our MPOs and TPRs and can have more input and dialogue and discussion on the items before we see them as TC, that would be helpful for me. So I'm just wondering if it's a March timeframe for us, does that mean we should be conveying to our stakeholders it's a February timeframe for them? I'm just trying to understand the sequence so that we can make sure to have more engagement with our constituents going forward.
Yeah, and I should have been clearer. So the list we'll be bringing to you all for year 3 is pretty much exactly what you've already seen several times. We've already, I think, prioritized through the series of add back discussions you all had and the work we'd even done before then. So I think this will be a pretty easy lift because it is built so much on the discussions we've already had. So this is not new projects or new ideas coming forward. It's sort of reconfirming a lot of the work we've already done.
Madam Chair, Bill Tebow, if this is an appropriate time to make a comment.
Yes, please.
Well, I've listened attentively to today's presentation. I thank everybody for doing it, and I did listen in, as I told you before, on the STAC meeting. And one of the things that's difficult for me is that I'm trying to get the big picture here. And similar to what we did as a commission with the $1.6 billion infrastructure package, I'm not getting the picture. In other words, when we did the $1.6 billion package, remember we allocated different kinds of sources of revenue instead of just going after then Senate Bill 267 money. And it helped me because it helped me see what was potentially down the line for us to advance. And I realized that this $150 million is just sort of kind of falling out of the sky, but it would have been, I think, beneficial, at least for me, to try to coordinate that in some fashion with the prospect of the governor's budget of 130 million, with the prospect of what are the projects with Senate Bill 267, year 3, 500 million, and how the relationship between, pre-COVID $1.6 billion and post-COVID 760 million potential add back dollars. And I was just hoping to see some options to enhance the recovery of the economy, even boosting some of the projects that are underway that we have now, and how when we stimulate the economy with this money, it does go into public health or other ways in methods to stimulate the economy. And, I really tried to take to heart a lot of the comments that were made, the 30 comments that were given to us, but also the comments that I've received from Walt Bolden from the South Central TPR, Stephanie Gonzalez from the Southeast TPR, and Adam Lancaster from the Central Front Range TPR, which are within District 10 that I service. And I've studied the resolution, and I know that there's an urgency to this, but I just kind of wish that we had a chance to look at different kinds of options, you know, similar to what we just did with, in a small way, with Region 3 and Region 5, in some of their comments about how they were, you know, able to use money now and maybe save money later and substitute money that's being spent now. And so, you know, I'm just uncomfortable at this point. I'm just really not comfortable in voting on this resolution today. And I just want you to know that, not because I think things are wrong or that things, you know, may not turn out good, but what if, just what if, the legislature does not appropriate the governor's request in the manner in which he wishes it to be appropriated? What if 267 money is not available for whatever reason? And I think it would also have helped a little bit with some of the interest groups that are out there wondering, you know, what's going on, if they would have seen some options and how their particular projects that they're concerned about would have fit within those options. So it's real difficult. I know this is fast-paced, fast-moving, but I wished that we were kind of doing what the next step slide says today. In other words, and I know that's really difficult to do, but going through all these things as meticulous as we can, given the situation. But I just wanted my fellow commissioners to know that I'm not necessarily opposed to what's been presented, but I'm very uncomfortable knowing how it fits within a big picture. And so when we go into our meeting, I'm probably going to vote no on the resolution unless there's some other kind of policy that is presented to me that overrides my doubt. And so I just wanted to let everybody know that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Tebow. And there's always the option for you to offer an alternate resolution to postpone this effort. Shoshana, Director Liu has some comments she'd like to make, and then I have Commissioner Hickey.
Thanks, Chair Stewart. A couple of comments in response to that. I think one thing, you know, I would push back a bit on the notion that there isn't a bigger picture, because the bigger picture is the $1.6 billion list that we have gone through several iterations of. And, you know, you all, or most of you, knowing there's been some turnover, will recall that at the outset of COVID, we picked sort of a bare bones scenario with the notion that we would plan for the worst and then build back in tranches from there. So what we're building to is the same list that we've been building back to the whole time. So the, you know, the sort of whole purpose of going through the planning process was that we wouldn't have to relitigate each list in a vacuum every time new money came back in, but rather to build back in increments. So, you know, we're not changing the plan. We're just putting a bite back into the plan and, you know, doing it in a way that is regionally equitable as possible, and trying to balance out against some of the sort of skewing that happened by dint of necessity last year. You know, I think in Region 2 in particular, folks will recall that doing a large project in the Pueblo area was part of why the Pikes Peak area was skewed downward in the last tranche. So we're trying to even it out a bit, knowing that not every piece is going to be able to do everything at once. So, you know, in aggregate, they build back towards the plan that everyone agreed to. You know, I think the notion of waiting for the governor's stimulus does not, you know, I think would have the net effect of slowing down work and keeping jobs from being able to move forward in the next month. I mean, the projects on this list were all picked because they're ready to go out to bid, which means, you know, real business in the economy now. So, you know, if this is delayed, to be able to ruminate on it more, the impact is that it slows down putting work out into the community of practice and getting those jobs to work in the spring. You know, I think folks know how the construction season typically works, but we're right in the heart of when you want to get jobs into the bidding cycle to be able to be under construction this spring. So the reason for the urgency is that the dollars came at a time when they're very usable to have shovels in the ground come springtime. And, you know, if we wait, that just doesn't happen. So, you know, knowing that each package is going to have some sub-regions that sort of net a little bit more or less in each of these increments, building back to the plan that we agreed to. You know, I think that I think I would just say that we fall back to the big picture that we've all kind of painted together and continue to kind of get back to in increments. And you know, there's you know, it's a lot of money and it's real money, but it's not everything, and we're not pretending it is, but rather trying to make progress towards the plan that we've previously litigated. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Liu. Commissioner Hickey.
I appreciate that response from Director Liu and Commissioner Thibault's important questions. We want to look forward because there may be more money coming as stimulus. And so let's prepare our communications and decision-making with that in mind.
All right. I think it's appropriate now maybe to finish this up unless there's any final comments, and then move into the Transportation Commission meeting, which is about almost an hour behind, but shouldn't take too long to go through this. We have one agenda item other than the public comments, and it's to discuss and act on proposed resolution number 1, which is the allocation of funding. Any final comments? Yes, yeah. Commissioner Hall.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For some reason, my chat doesn't work. I would just like to make a comment that these projects were not picked out of the air. These are 10-year projects that were able to move forward with, you know, it's almost like it's not, we hate to say it's not a lot of money, but 134 million is something that I think the staff has done a very good job in trying to move around the state to actually stimulate the economy. When those are ready, road ready, they're ready to go projects, that stimulates the economy very quickly because every single one of those projects means jobs. And so jobs is what we're trying to do, is stimulate the economy. We're doing a lot of safety projects. And I think the idea of putting off and doing more discussion is certainly not generating anything toward the economy. And so much as I really respect you, Commissioner Thibault, I think it's a huge mistake for us to back off when we already have those projects. They've been in the pipeline for quite some time, and they're all projects that we know need to move forward, and that will free up money so that if we get a stimulus from the governor, then we have money then to move on the next project. So I think it's a huge mistake to back off. I think we need to move forward, get those jobs out there, because that stimulates the economy, and there's safety projects that stimulate safety.
Thank you. And there's several comments in the chat box that you can read from Commissioner Gifford and Commissioner Beatty as well. Any final comments before we leave this meeting and reconvene as the Transportation Commission?
Madam Chair, what link are we using for the transportation meeting? I was just looking through all the notes from Jennifer. Are we using a different bridge? And if so, could she just resend it just so to make sure that we're right on time?
We're not leaving.
We're just staying, just stay put?
Yes.
Yeah, we're just rolling into the next one.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, that being said, let's end this workshop and go into our Transportation Commission meeting. And I'll look to Herman to call roll, please.
Commissioner Gifford.
Sure.
Commissioner Stanton. Commissioner Stanton.
He had to leave. He may come back on in the middle of the meeting.
Commissioner Adams.
Here.
Commissioner Becky.
Here.
Commissioner Vasquez. Commissioner Vasquez.
I don't think she ever joined us this morning.
Commissioner Zink.
Here.
Commissioner Hickey.
Here, thank you.
Commissioner Tebow.
Here.
Commissioner Beatty.
Here.
Vice Chair Hall.
Here.
Chair Stewart.
Here. Thank you. It looks like we have 9 out of the 11 here for this Transportation Commission meeting, special meeting, January 4th. And the first item of business is public comments that were in fact provided to the Transportation Commission prior to opening this meeting. This morning, we had 32 comments. Most of the comments were related to a general theme of making sure that COVID relief funds be used to mitigate the effects of harm of the pandemic on our communities and be used for items and projects that affect the health of our state, like revitalizing main streets, providing public transit, putting money toward walking and biking projects, and working toward the safety aspects of our Vision Zero at CDOT. We have all had a chance to read those, and they will be provided in the minutes of this meeting. I want to say that we had a lengthy discussion in the workshop that acknowledged the appropriateness of the comments and thanked all of the commenters, and the comments that were received from our commission in support of the comments received from the public were that we agree that the stimulus funds should be advancing economic recovery, that they are working, many of the projects are working toward the revitalization, Main Street planning. Many of these projects have significant safety components. Many of the projects are projects that support multimodal for transit, biking, and walking. There's a large project on I-25 that's a sound wall that also has an air quality mitigation component that protects neighborhoods from some of the road-related air pollution that in fact exacerbates people who have breathing difficulties. So we acknowledged all of that, and I'd open it to anybody who is on the commission who wants to make any further comments about the public comments that we received.
Jennifer, we have received one more since the start of the meeting. There are actually 3 more since the start of the meeting. I forwarded 2. I have 1 more, and it's basically the same thing. Just wanted to
Thank you. So I'll change that to say we've received 33 comments then.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. If no one has anything to add at this point, we'll go into the agenda item number 3, which is discuss and act on proposed resolution number 1. You have that resolution in front of you in your packet, and it's a resolution related to federal COVID-19 relief package.
Madam Chairman, I move for the approval of the proposed resolution number 1 of our January 4th, 2021 special meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Barry Beatty, I second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion?
Yes, there's an error in the second page. The second whereas is 21. Instead, the version we got said 2020. It's been corrected.
Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Zink.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Zink. All right, I'd like to ask, is there, there's a motion and a second on the table. Is there anyone who wishes to abstain from the vote on this resolution? Is there
Madam,
Yes.
Madam Chair, if I could just ask, because we're incorporating the list essentially by reference in this memo or this resolution, like Jennifer, just to bring up the memo to show the 2 corrections. Just so you know precisely what you're voting on. There was a couple of small edits. We heard about the Region 3 edit that that changes, it adds some wording. And Jennifer, we can't really see the memo yet. I don't know if you're still working on it. There you go.
There you go.
The first one in Region 2, it says that we're utilizing 8.5 million in the PPACG's TMA sub-allocation. Subsequent conversations over the weekend is that there could also be other PPACG existing STBG funds, but it would total 8.5 million in STBG. So we've made that correction just to be as precise as possible. And then as well, the Region 3, we've added the language, the I-70B project that you can see there as explained by Mike earlier. So just wanted to make sure you saw those so you knew that when you're essentially incorporating this memo, this list by reference in your resolution, that this would be what you're voting on.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that explanation and clarification. I'll go back to a motion in a second. I'm wondering if there's any further discussion. Seeing none, I will ask once again, is there anyone who wishes to abstain from voting on this resolution? Is there anyone who is opposed, who's voting in opposition to this resolution?
Madam Chair, Bill Tebow, I'll enter my objection.
Thank you. Commissioner Tebow, any others in opposition to the approval of this resolution? All right. Seeing none, that means we have 8 commissioners that are voting in approval of this commission and 1 who is voting in opposition, and that's Commissioner Tebow. Is there any other business to come before the Transportation Commission?
Nope.
All right. Seeing none, we'll call this meeting adjourned at 12:22. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.